Hello and welcome to today's edition of the Daf Yomi. Today's Daf is from Bekhorot Daf 27 Amud. So finishing off on the last Amud, the Bride adds, and in all these cases, although it's prohibited to give Turum and tied to a priest or leave it as his wages, nevertheless there's a benefit of discretion for the owners of the produce, i.e. benefit accrued from the option of giving Turum and tied to any priest or Levite of their choosing. So what does it mean? Benefit of discretion for the owners, Tovas Hana of Olim. An Israelite may say to another Israelite, take this money and give your teruma, firstborn animal, or all the gifts of priesthood to my grandson who is a priest. This applies only when the owner is considering which of the two priests to give it to for free, and the third party offers him money to sway his decision. The halacha, in according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan and the Jews from Talmud Demai 6.2, the Rambam does not distinguish between teruma and other gifts of priesthood. From the Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Teruma 12:20-21. The verse continues. How so? With regard to an Israelite who separated teruma from his pile of grain, another Israelite found him and said to him, take this seller coin for yourself and give the teruma and tithe to my daughter's son who is a priest. It is permitted. But if it was a priest who gave the seller coin for the right to give teruma and tithe to another priest, it is prohibited. So let's explain that footnote. The commentators explain that since this priest may eat it to himself, it appears as though he's paying a seller in order to receive it. That's from Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola. Others add that there's a concern that the two priests might make a deal between themselves, and each will give to the other, which has the appearance of doing business with teruma. Mari Kochas on the Rambam, Sefer Chabona Hilchot Terumas 12:20. Priests may not pay for the gifts that they receive. The Gemara asks, and according to the Tan of this Brisa, what is the reason that he does not state that the owners also have the benefit of discretion with regard to the gifts of the priesthood, i.e. the foreleg, jaw, and more, which must be given to the priest from every non-sacred animal that one slaughters? Why did he mention teruma alone? The Gemara answers that he could have said to you, in the case of teruma which has inherent sanctity, and which therefore cannot be redeemed, the priest will not come to with it and treat it as though it has no sanctity, even if the owner receives payment for it. By contrast, with regard to these gifts of the priesthood, since they have sanctity and that inherits in its value, which means that once the priest has received them, he may sell them. The priest may come to with them by saying that the sanctity that they have can be redeemed into 4 zuz, I want the one seller, and he might come to treat them in a manner that one treats non-sacred food. So what does that mean? A priest may eat his gifts of the priest in any manner of his choice. If he has no preference, he should eat them roasted with seasoning in a manner of royalty. And that's Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Bekhorot 9:22 Shulchan Aruch 61:12. This would be a mistake, as a priest must eat his priest to give them in a dignified manner. I roasted and with seasoning. He put in 132. On a related topic, Rava says, teruma for outside the Israel does not have any prohibition due to a priest. What's the footnote? The prohibition against a priest assisting at the threshing floor does not apply in the case of teruma from outside the Eretz Yisrael. This halacha, in accordance to the opinion of Rava, on the Sefer Zerayim Hilchot 5:12. Assisting on the threshing floor. The state decree must separate teruma from produce grown in certain places outside of Eretz Yisrael. Yet this halacha governing this teruma is not as stringent as those that apply to teruma from produce grown within Eretz Yisrael. Consequently, one may give such teruma to a priest for helping at the threshing floor. In support of this claim, the Gemara relates that Rav Hama gave teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael to a servant who was a priest as his wages. With regard to teruma from outside Eretz Yisrael, Shmuel says teruma from outside Eretz Yisrael that became mixed with non-sacred produce is nullified in the majority. So what does that mean? Teruma is chutz from Eretz Yisrael, potato barov. It is permitted to nullify teruma or chalav from outside Eretz Yisraal and to eat it until it reaches impurity. This is halacha in accordance with the opinions of Shmuel and Rabbah. Such a mission outside in the Rambam that if there is no priest available, a non-priest may also eat this mixture, even if it was half teruma and half non-sacred. See the shach. It's really in accordance to the opinion of Rabbi Zera in the Jewish Talmud 4:4. The Ramah cites an opinion that teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael may not be eaten by non-priests unless it is nullified in 100 parts of the same type of food or 60 parts in a different type of food. And that's from Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Bekhorot 5:12 Shulchan Aruch 323:1. unlike ordinary teruma, which requires 100 parts of non-sacred produce to nullify it. The Gemara relates that Rabbah, who was a priest, would nullify his teruma for outside Yisrael in the majority of Abamnisha and eat it during his days of impurity. So what does that mean? Mevatla barov ochal la bimei tum also. Some commentaries maintain that the leniency with regard to such teruma is only the priest may eat it during the 30 days of impurity. As Gemara testifies with regard to Rabbah, who was a priest, Tosfot, a non-priest may not eat even such teruma unless it was mixed with other substances in a ratio of 1 to 100. Yimenachas 67a. Conversely, Rashi writes that Shmuel deemed it permitted even for non-priests. Apparently, he derives his conclusion from the incident involving Rav Huna, son of Rav Yeshua, as there is no evidence that he was a priest. It is likewise indicated in the Jewish Talmud in Chala 4:4 that it's permitted to non-priests. Both of these acts are prohibited in the case of teruma from produce grown in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara relates, Rav Huna, son of Rav Yeshua, when he would happen to have wine of teruma from produce grown outside of Eretz Yisrael, he would pour 2 jugs. Hava Rami Derei Natni V'chulu. The Rambam writes that if one has wine from teruma from outside the Eretz Yisrael, he may mix one log of it with 2 logs of non-sacred wine. He may then take another log of teruma wine, mix it with those 3 logs, and remove 1 log to drink. He may continue adding 1 log and removing 1 log, as is the practice of Rav Huna, son of Rav Yeshua. The Riva counters that Rambam's suggestion is not in accordance with the Gemara, as this would mean that there are 2 logs of teruma with 2 logs of non-sacred wine, and therefore there is no majority of non-sacred wine. The commentaries explain that the Rambam's text of the Gemara did not contain the phrase and remove 1. Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Terumat 13:11, see Maharid Al-Ghazi, of non-sacred wine and 1 jug of teruma wine into a vat, in order to nullify the teruma wine, and then take out 1 jug's worth of wine to drink. Having done so, from here onward, every time he received 1 more teruma wine grown out of Eretz Yisrael, he would pour 1 jug of teruma wine into the same vat, which still contained 2 jugs worth of wine, and take out 1 jug's worth of wine. As Shmuel further says, teruma from produce grown outside of Eretz Yisrael does not need to be separated before one eats the produce. Rather, one may proceed to eat and afterwards separate teruma from the remains. What does that mean? One may eat dough outside of Eretz Yisrael with the intent to separate challah afterward. The obligation to separate challah applied by being allowed to dough from outside of Eretz Yisrael. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. The Umar writes that one must leave slightly more than the minimum amount for challah, so that there is some dough from which the challah is separated. Now, so the Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Bekhorot 5:12, Shulchan Aruch Yodeh 323:1. And Shmuel also says, teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael is prohibited only to a member of the priestly household whose impurity comes from his body. What does that mean? Since the obligation to separate teruma and challah from outside of Eretz Yisrael is by rabbinic law, they are prohibited only to a member of a priestly household who is impure due to some bodily omission, i.e., one who experiences a similar omission as Zava, a menstruating woman, or a woman after childbirth. Once they have immersed in a ritual bath, these individuals may partake of teruma immediately and do not need to wait until nightfall. Some authorities in the Ram and the Ran are stringent and rule that they must wait until nightfall. And that's the Ram Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Teruma 7:8 and Hilchot Bekhorot 5:10, Shulchan Aruch Yodeh 22:5. E.g., a man who experiences a similar omission or a menstruating woman. It is not prohibited to a priest who came to contact with a corpse, an animal carcass, or the carcass of a creeping animal. And the statement that such teruma is forbidden to one whose impurity comes from his body applies only with regard to eating it, but with regard to touching teruma from outside the Eretz Yisrael, we have no problem with it. Ravina says, therefore, a menstruating woman whose impurity comes from her body may separate challah. What's the fun? A menstruating woman may separate challah outside the Eretz Yisrael, and she's prohibited only from eating it. It's permitted for her to touch it. That's Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Teruma 12:1 and Bekhorot 5:12, from dough outside of Eretz Yisrael, and a minor priest who has never experienced a similar mission and is therefore ritually pure may eat it. When one prepares dough outside of Eretz Yisrael, he must separate challah twice. The first challah is burned because it is ritually impure with the impurity of Gentile lands. The second challah is given to a priest to eat, so that the mitzvah of challah should not be forgotten. A priest who is impure may eat his challah, even if he is a zav. This halacha is according to the Mishnah in Tractate Chala 4:8. If one wishes, he may separate challah only once and feed it to a minor priest who has never experienced similar mission, or to the daughter of a priest who has never menstruated. This is according to the opinion of Ravina. Similarly, a priest who has mercy in the ritual bath may eat that challah that is separated first, in which case there is no need to separate challah a second time. The Ramah cites an opinion that since challah is presently not eaten at all in Eretz Yisrael, as there are no ashes of the red heifer available to purify priests, challah need to be separated only once outside of Eretz Yisrael, and this is burned. It should not be given to a minor priest, as it is impossible to know for certain who is a priest. And that's in the Rambam Sefer Devarim, Hilchot Bekhorot 5:5-11, Shulchan Aruch Yodea 3:22-5, and the Shachan attached there. Some commentators explain that the word minor here means one who is less than 9 years old, provided it's possible that he experienced a similar mission. According to Rashi's first explanation, it is referring to a child who is less than 13 years old, as he is not obligated to observe the mitzvah. It would appear that even an adult priest who experienced a similar mission would be permitted to eat it after he immersed in a ritual bath. Rashi citing Sha'ayla Durav Achigon 108. Others write that an adult priest may not eat the truma even after immersion, as he come to eat it on another occasion without immersing first. Derive it on the Rambam Sefer Devarim, Truma 7:8. It is prohibited for a priest who is ritually impure to partake of truma from outside of Eretz Yisrael that has been touched by a menstruating woman, despite the fact that it is permitted for her to touch that produce. Conversely, it is permitted for a child who is not obligated in mitzvot to eat that impure produce. Others contend that the Gemara does not specifically mean that only a child may eat it. Rather, since one separates only a small amount of dough as challah, it is more common to give it to a child. From the Tosfot. And if there is no minor piece available, she takes the challah with the top of a skewer, a masa. So what does that mean? A masa is a skewer. Rashi explains that this means a poker or skewer, where Tosfot contend that it is referring to a baker's paddle. Bereish masa with the top of a skewer. Some commentaries maintain that she may also place it directly with her hands, as she has already handled the challah when she separated it. One mentions the skewer only because it is a more practical method of pushing the challah further into the fire. That's from Tosfot and Tosfot his Zaniot. Rashi writes that because she has already rendered the challah, she must be careful not to touch it, and therefore she must use a skewer. Yet others hold that a menstruating woman may not separate challah unless there is no one else available who can separate it for her. Therefore, when burning it, she must be careful not to touch it, especially if there is a young priest who would be permitted to eat it in a state of ritual purity to the Ra'avan. There is an entirely different interpretation which explains that the phrase Reish Masa does not mean top of the skewer, but first challah, and that's from Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola, and throws it in the oven, and then separates another piece from the dough challah, not because it is necessary, but so that the halachic category of challah should not be forgotten. And an adult priest may eat it, even if it is ritually impure. The Gemara relates that Rav Nachman Bar Yaakov of the Babylonian Amora of the second and third generation of Amoraim. Although he cites statements in the name of both Rab and Shmuel, his primary teacher was Rabba Ba'avu, Rav's student. He never formally headed one of the Babylonian academies, but many of the sages of the next generation were students, including the great Amora Rava. In his youth, Rav Nachman was already recognized as a prodigy. He married Yalta, a member of the Gdal's family who was learned and a strong-willed woman. Subsequently, Rav Nachman was appointed a judge in the Gdal's house in Hadea. In the capacity, Rav Nachman became an expert in monetary law to the extent that the Gemara concludes that in monetary law his opinion is always accepted as halacha. Although Rav Nachman was known to have a forceful personality, he was also considered one of those pious men of his generation, and the Gemara cites numerous examples of his acts of kindness. Rav Ammon. There's several individuals by the name of Rav Ammon mentioned in the Gemara. The one mentioned here is from the second generation of Amoraim and a student of Rav. By Rav Nachman's time, Rav Ammon was considered venerable and important to the extent that the Gemara in Ketubos 11b states Rav Ammon and all the prominent sages of the generation, which indicates that Rav Ammon was the greatest of them. And Rami Bar Chama whose first name is a contraction of the name Rav Ami, was important more from the fourth generation of Babylonian Amoraim. It is usually considered the preeminent disciple of Rav Chisda, and he eventually married Rav Chisda's daughter. Rami Bar Hama also studied under Rav Nachman and Rav Shesha and engaged them in halachic discussions. He was known for his fierce intellect and his masterful memory of the oral tradition. Rami Bar Hama enjoyed a close relationship with his younger friend and colleague Rava. After his death, Rav married his widow, Rav Chisda's daughter. Rami Bar Hama's grandson was Yamar Meima, were traveling in a ferry. Rav Ammon went to relieve himself. A certain woman came from Menachem and Rav Ami and said to them, in the case one is in pure contact with a corpse, what is the law with regard to whether he may immerse himself in a ritual bath and take a tumor from outside the earth? So Menachem said to Rami Bar Hama. Moving on to Amud B. But do we have sprinkling of the ashes of the red heifer? So what's the footnote? Without sprinkling, how does immersion in a ritual bath purify a person? According to Rashi, the question is whether, in addition to immersing in a ritual bath, one who has come into contact with a corpse must also wait until nightfall, as though it were the seventh day of his purification process. Rav Nachman's reply is that since he does not receive the sprinkling on the third and seventh days of his purification process, he does not need to wait until nightfall either. Since without such sprinkling one remains impure after contact with a corpse, how does it help to immerse in the ritual bath? Rami Bar Hama said to him, shouldn't Rav Nachman be concerned for the opinion of the old man, i.e. Rav Ammon? Wouldn't it be better to have waited until he returned before answering? Meanwhile, Rav Ammon came back. He said to them, this is what Rav says. One who became impure with impurity imparted by a cause may immerse and partake of teruma from produce grown outside of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara comments, but the halacha is not in accordance with his opinion. So what's the footnote? Later chasa the devase bechura. In other words, the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rav. Rather, it is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel, who holds that teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael is prohibited to a priest only if he is impure due to an emission from his body. This is derived by an a fortiori inference, since Mazucha ruled against the opinion of Rav Shesha with regard to impurity imparted by the carcass of a creeping animal, maintaining that immersion is not necessary despite the fact that there is no requirement for the ashes of the red heifer. According to Rashi's opinion, that the discussion is not referring to the requirement of immersion, but to whether or not he must wait until nightfall. The Gemara's conclusion is that one who becomes impure through contact with the carcass of a creeping animal must wait until nightfall, and the same applies to one who becomes impure through contact with a corpse. Shai Lamora. According to most manuscripts, Rav Shesha's statement is not a continuation of the previous sentence. According to those manuscripts, the correct text should read, and Mazuta said. Mazuta said in the name of Rav Shesha, one who became impure through contact with the carcass of a creeping animal may immerse in ritual bath and partake of teruma from produce grown outside of Eretz Yisrael. One who is ritually impure through contact with any impure item, including a corpse, from which it is impossible to become pure nowadays, is not required to immerse in ritual bath before eating teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael. This rule is according to the interpretation of Tosfot. Rambam Sefer Zerayim Hilchot Teruma 7a Shulchan Aruch Yodeh 322.5. Mazut said in the name of Rashi said, one who became impure through contact with the carcass of a grieving animal may immerse in ritual bath and partake of teruma from outside of Eretz Yisrael.
Oh yeah, that's that stadium.
What? Yeah, that's obviously
I need a book. Let's go spell something again.
you call this a house?
I was joking.
Like that. Oh, more legs. Exactly.
Now one time.
Yeah.
Depends how old you are and depends what game.
Oh, he's full of 6 as well.
Also, it'll be only one time.
It's the world sheep and animals.
Huh?
Sheep and animals. Not like me, like
Rabbit.
sheep and cows.
Rabbit.
Bye.